And we are rolling with Understanding Conspiracy, also known as Paul. I love your
Hello.
new light. And I was thinking about if I was your mother, I would be so proud of you.
Oh,
You do a great job. And I saw you on someone else's podcast the other day, and they asked you a pretty straightforward question, and you gave them a straightforward answer. And I was so proud of you because, like, it was one of those that, like, you could tell it wasn't in agreement with the host or whatever, and you really not just said what you believed, but you broke down why you believed it, and it was just brilliant. And that is the kind of stuff I love seeing. And so when I saw your Truth or Singularity, I'm like, that's the name. That's the name. It's the thing that I've thought about it for years. I'm not kidding. I even wrote a book once about a concept of like gangs, but instead of going out and stealing, they go out and they do wonderful things, like more than just protecting, like, you know, the what are they called, Hell's Angels or whatever in New York, with the subways. But I think that this is where we have to go next. So when you named it, I was like, I've got to have him on. So tell everyone on my end why it was that I'm so freaking out about your title of your show called Truth or Singularity. Tell them what
well,
it is.
it's funny because that was really like a on the day type of thought. That video, I'd only really come up with it like maybe a few hours before going live and just kind of like hashing it out in my brain. And I'm actually, before I begin, I am curious to understand what you took away from it first. To be honest, because
So
it's so
so
you,
like
you
I
give
was
me what you think it
okay.
is, and then
Okay.
I'll give you my take. Go on.
So to me, the best way that I could explain it is if you see hummingbirds and they're all migrating to Mexico, and none of them have gotten directions, and none of them have had, but it had to stop when everyone else was going. They all moved as a force because they were in tune with love and peace and nature, and they just know when, because they're so connected. And I think of that as the true body of Christ. And that's kind of well, I get upset sometimes because people are like, oh, I'm really mad at you for not coming to my party or whatever, when really that is the kind of pressure we put on each other that keeps us from doing the very thing that the Holy Spirit wants us to do. So for me,
Mm.
the way I interpreted what you were saying was that, unlike what they're trying to do in technology, where they're trying to create a technology so powerful that it can go beyond or reach beyond what humans can do into kind of God territory, right?
Mm.
And so this is, in my opinion, the only way we fix it. There's going to be a million Jeffrey Epsteins. There's going to be a million people trying to take over schools, government, whatever. There's always a new one. We're dealing with like powers and principalities and fallen angels and Nephilim, and and so to
Mhm.
me, it is the ability for us all to understand it's the way out. So am I
Yeah.
wrong?
No, that's probably a good way of phrasing it. I think there's many ways you could kind of phrase this concept and this idea. And I think the parallel you made there, which I made to the transhumanist movement, is probably the best way to understand why I've chosen the terminology, the singularity. So traditionally, the singularity is understood in transhumanist circles. And this is a term coined, I think, by Ray Kurzweil. I think he's the main guy who kind of came up with this idea. And he's a scientist, a billionaire, heavily invested in technology. And he also has basically pumped a lot of money into trying to reach this state within AI and robotics, which is basically consciousness transference. That's what he wants to be able to do. He wants to be able to move his essence, his soul, his consciousness, as he would describe it, into an immortal body and live forever. But the only chance we have of reaching that possibility, this is his theory, by the way, I'm not saying this is true, okay? But he believes that we must reach what's called the singularity first within technology and AI. It needs to reach a level where it's so advanced that it gets beyond something we can even comprehend anymore. things are never the same after the singularity. It changes the landscape of reality as we know it. When technology gets to that level, that's when we've reached the singularity, and that's when we reach immortality. That's basically his end goal. That's when we'll be able to have technology so sufficient that it's indistinguishable from the biology. We can create bodies, and we can transfer consciousness. We can break mind down into data. We can mold and transform reality in our image. We will be as gods, is basically what he's saying. On a real nanoparticle quantum level as well. We're talking here like all technology will converge. So that includes like AI, robotics, quantum physics, everything, chemistry, biology, all sciences kind of reach this apex moment of understanding, this mass form of understanding where mankind will finally be able to truly take control of their own evolution and become as gods themselves, no longer win to circumstance or environments, but instead we now call the shots. And again, this is gene splicing, gene editing, all this type of stuff as well, which is we see echoes of in the media right now, through animal cloning and designer babies, stuff like this, So these things are already growing. They're already getting scarier by the month now, even by the week. We're seeing things coming out of what they're capable of doing with their technology. And Ray Kurzweil's prediction is 2045. That's kind of when he believes we're going to reach the transhumanist singularity, where man will be able to live forever. Now, I don't believe any of that. I think it's a lie, personally. I think it's a complete con. I think they've been sold a bill of goods by demons, basically, who they're communicating with through the quantum technology and AI and the rest of it. And I think they've been told, here's the technology and the means that you need to create in order to transfer your consciousness and live forever. But what they're really doing is being conned into building bodies that can house consciousness for the Nephilim to inhabit. I think that's what's really going to happen at the end. And humans actually can't transfer their consciousness. It's not possible. God will not allow that. He made you in his image, and your body and your soul are one. There's no separating them, unfortunately. If you got what you got, that's how God made you. And you can't just put yourself into a new machine. You're not. It's not that simple, but I think they've been sold that it can be that simple by agents of darkness who basically lie to them. That's kind of what I think. I think the real trick is to create these bodies that can house consciousness with some kind of biomechanical android with AI holographic brain technology, so it kind of mimics the human brain enough to be able to house complex thoughts and abilities, which these disembodied spirits of Nephilim, which were never made in God's image, the body is not. They're of the earth and only. There's no from high breath of God in them, so they're kind of stuck on earth without a body. And if you make an earthly vessel for them, they can inhabit it. They inhabit things all the time. They inhabit your body, inhabit objects. These demons can inhabit anything that's physical, but a body that can feel and taste and control and speak and run and laugh, and that's perfect for them. That's what they want. That's the ideal body, which is why they possess us. Before getting kicked out by the Holy Spirit, which isn't great. But you can't do that if you make a robot body for them. They can stay in there indefinitely and no one can cast them out, Well, that's what they think. I'm sure people with authority could still mess with them, but they have the plans. They have their plans, which I'm sure God laughs at. And that's the singularity. Okay, so that's what mankind, or at least these billionaires, are all working towards, reaching this human, fleshly, mechanical version of becoming God, or transcending the limitations of the godly creation of physicality. Okay. I think in the truth movement, we have our own thing going on parallel to this. And perhaps this is the God laughs situation to their plans. I feel like the truth movement itself is also working towards its own version of its own singularity. And it's not done through technological means, though technology certainly helps, like these conversations we're having today, but it's more about a convergence of ideas is happening. I think the landscape of the truther culture has changed drastically in the last decade alone, which I've observed when I've been in the game. And in the last even 5 years, it seems like it's speeding up, and it seems like more and more people are waking up rapidly, exponentially, some might say. And this is how the singularity is supposed to work. It's supposed to be exponential. It's not just like steps and then nothing and then a step up and then nothing. It goes up and up and up and up until it's just straight up. There's no curve anymore. I feel like we're getting to that point with the truth movement too. And I kind of noticed when I came back in like 2023, anybody and everybody suddenly has a conspiracy podcast now. It's the mainstream. It's not like some weird in the corner crazy thing anymore. I think everybody, to some extent, now we can argue to what extent they want to admit it or would publicly
Right.
talk about it. But I think every single person now, to some extent, at least has this thing inside of them in the back of their brain that tells them this isn't right. Something is wrong. Now, in the past, that wasn't the case. There's many people who are just blissfully ignorant and going through life not knowing anything. But I think everybody now, especially since the whole COVID situation, where it was demonstrated to us, they can control you. They can shut everything down like that. They have power, and with all the information coming out as the aftermath of what they did and the deaths and the evidences proving that they lied to you about the efficacy of the things they did to us, I think people are now realizing, wow, we really are under control by evil people. It's that simple. And they might not know the minutiae or the details of what that means, what these evil people believe, or what the long-term agendas are, or all that type of stuff yet. But I think everybody now kind of knows things are not what they seem. And I think this is the beginning of the exponential rise that we're going to start seeing over the next decade, at least, on that rise towards maybe 2045, just like Ray Kurzweil. Let's do parallel to his time scale, shall we? But we're in the infancies now of that moment where things are not going to be the same ever again, I would say. And we're going to go through that period. So that's why I've coined this term, the truth of singularity. I really feel like we're going through something right now. And I think God's moving in big ways too. I think you can put this down to people waking up to the reality of God being real, in contrast to the efforts of these people who rule the physical world to be as God. And I think that what the truth movement is converging into is a realization that there is a creator. And there's still going to be a lot of arguments and parsing out just the nature of that creator. I think the Gnostic community had a good foothold in the truth community for the better part of maybe 5 years now, where God is an evil creator. Yes, it's a creator, but he's evil. That's kind of what the consensus has been for a long time. And I think maybe that was necessary so people could get a taste of just even thinking about there being a creator, as opposed to the absolute secularist atheism we've kind of been dominated with for the better part of like 2 decades or 3 decades, even, well, since maybe after World War II, since all this has been kind of begun, but I feel like people have realized atheism's empty, it's hollow, it's false. I think people know there's more to reality, but they don't quite want to accept that there's a loving God yet. So maybe they have to go through the Gnostic pipeline first. Maybe that's necessary. Maybe God knows that. Okay, well, at least let's get you thinking about spirituality, I think is what he thought first. Let's get you just outside of the completely dogmatic, materialistic worldview. Let's get you thinking about spiritual concepts. And Gnosticism does offer that, though it frames God as the bad guy. Evil, cruel prison keeper, trapping us here in our flesh prisons, that type of stuff, Matrix stuff. But I feel like that's necessary to get the cogs going. And then eventually people tend to mature out of that into Christianity. And often they end up going through maybe the Catholic or Orthodox route, something like a churchianity type route, because that's their only framework for what it means to be a Christian. I must go through the church. And then there's a process to go through the corruptions of the churches and to fall away from that, I would say, and to get into more the conspiracy world where you become a truther. And I'd say most truthers end up being Christian, but not like church Christians. We're truther Christians, and that's something different. And I think the whole singularity is to get more people to that level, to the level of being a Christian truther and not a churchianity type Christian. And look, I'm not saying that's bad, that's necessary. It's good for community, it's good for learning the word, it's good for those studies, it's good for that fellowship, but you'll always need more. You'll need the meat, and you're going to get milk in the church, is what I'll say. I think when you get to what we're doing here in the truther culture for the better part of the past 2 decades, I would say we have been getting into the really dark stuff, the meat, the hidden stuff, the esoteric stuff, the occult stuff, but from a biblical lens where Jesus is king and what we're really up against, understanding the principalities, the darkness, the wickedness in high places. And I feel like, this is my observation, a lot more people are coming to that now. Very quickly, the Christian truther perspective. And I think there is a concerted counter movement against this singularity right now as well, to co-opt the Christians who are waking up.
Oh, that'll happen. That'll happen like crazy. Yes.
Oh, yeah. And I think they're trying to lead them
it
down.
On my channel. Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Go ahead, share it. But
No,
just to
no, I don't
summarize
want
that.
to. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I was confirming what you were saying. Yes.
Yeah, well, I think they're leading down a Christian nationalist movement now. That's what I've
Hmm.
observed. They're going to take that innate desire for man to have a deistic spirit and to have a relationship with God and
Hmm.
equate that with being fusing it with the state. So this is a Christian nation, and I am going to defend my nation against non-Christians, that type of thing. A militarized Christianity, okay? Which, when you get down to the words of Jesus Christ, vengeance is the Lord's, and He comes back as a conquering King. Sure, He doesn't tell you to do that, okay? So I think that people need to get used to that idea, and they point to the Crusaders fighting against the Muslim hordes, and we need that kind of Christianity back. And even then, I would question whether the validity of that, even historically speaking, the validity of any of that. But never mind that. Even just the idea that those are quote unquote what Christianity should be is up for debate in my eyes. But that's the kind of Christianity that they're trying to revive now. The Deus Vult, we need another crusade type of Christianity. And that results in war and death and bloodshed and misery and pain
And I'm
and
so
destruction.
over it. Yes.
But that's what they're aiming for. And I feel like there's a trap at play here. I think Albert Pike wrote about this in his letter to Mazzini in the Three World Wars. You can argue about the validity of that letter and say it got debunked, or the timing's wrong, or the language used proves it's not written when they said it was. Either way, it's still coming true. That plan on that letter is still coming to full fruition right now. And it makes it clear there's going to come a time where they'll unleash the nihilists and the atheists. And we've seen that happen, haven't we? Am I still there? Am I cut out?
Oh yeah, you're here. Can you hear me?
It looks like the screen may have just frozen on my end there for a second.
Oh,
So
okay.
sorry.
Nope. All is well.
All is well. Right, good. Yeah, so it explains how they are going to release the nihilists and the atheists, and there's going to be destruction from that. There's going to be death and misery. And that's communism. That's the best part of the 20th century. We saw absolute death and genocide and misery from the communistic ideology. Okay, the anti-religious communistic ideology. And then out of that, there's going to be a suppression of Christianity. And we're going to find that Christian nations are going to kind of be softly taught and given this kind of socialist communist ideology. But it's done on purpose to put Christianity down enough to get them pissed off, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And they want that to happen. So Christians will snap back and rise back against this total secularist anti-God ideology. Okay. We've been living through that, the social Marxist liberal left, the utter control of all the schools and institutions with liberal propaganda, blah, 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 blah. And what we're seeing now is a counterculture revivalist, Christian nationalist identitarian movement going against this complete and total liberal left-wing ideological social Marxist movement that we've been suppressed by for so long. And this is the thing, like, it's obvious what the liberal left are doing.
I agree.
Like the liberal left, they're evil. They're making very heinous choices and policies that are just anti-God, anti-women, anti-children, perverse and disgusting, and just anti-freedom in every way. And it's so obviously evil and over the top. You have to wonder if are they dumb or do they have an agenda? Okay, because why would they be so obvious about it? And I think they're being obvious about it because they're trying to piss people off. They're trying to get the nationalist Christian types to rise up in anger and start a revolution. And that's exactly what Albert Pike said would happen. Christianity will be restrained by these nihilists and atheists until the point where we need them to be released to foment the Third World War. And that will be between all the Abrahamic religions. So it'll be Christians versus the Muslims versus the Jews, all in the Middle East. Okay, but it'll be Zionism versus Islam versus Christianity. And that war will be so destructive and horrible and disgusting that it will leave mankind completely disillusioned with religion. Look at what religion has caused. Look at all this death and misery. But mankind, knowing they need to believe in something bigger than themselves, now shown that atheism leads to death and destruction, belief in a God like the Abrahamic God leads to destruction and death. What can we do? Well, that's when you give them the New Age Luciferian religion. Okay. And that's what he says. That's literally his word. We'll give them the pure doctrine of Lucifer as a replacement. I think we're on the cusp right now of the Christians being unrestrained of that plan to
Yeah.
go against this dogmatic liberal leftism that's been suppressing us for so long. I think the plan's going exactly as it should. I think the world stage has been played out like this. And I think we're being played on a big scale. And I think that's to suppress the fact that people are now waking up. So they're trying to co-opt it, move it, and shift it. And I think we're at a point actually where God laughs and we can convince people and let them know that this is the long-term plan. It ruins everything. The magic trick's over.
And
maybe
that's
we
why
can
I
then
wanted you here talking
yeah.
about it.
I'm hoping we can hijack this and instead go towards our own singularity and reach a point of no return, even for the controllers, where they've lost control of the narrative and we do all know the truth. I think it's possible. I think it's on the cards. I think it is possible. It involves us being brave and telling the truth from a Christian truther perspective. So not aren't the liberals evil and we need to have a right-wing revolution perspective.
My gosh,
that's still the narrative. That's still the problem.
It's the same thing. Yeah. And I think that's the main thing is that it really comes down to two realms. It's the heavenly realm, right? And then there's the worldly realm. And everyone that is of the more false light wants you to believe it's of race or it's of religion or it's of politics. And I mean, even, I've got friends who really get this stuff that are still die hard fighting it out in politics. And I just look at them and I'm like, well, how do you not see that not only do we have today's martyr, Charlie Kirk, but what are they doing? They're going straight in for exactly what you said, that whole nationalist, we're going to come in. And then where are they going? To the colleges. Why? Because they're young and they haven't had enough mileage on this earth or in this world to understand how the realm really works. And so I get a little bit disappointed with people my age that are still not getting it. But I am so thankful for people like you. And you're right. I do see a lot of even my family members or friends' kids that they're the ones sending stuff to the parents and trying to, wake them up, which is great.
Yeah, well, I think we have a lot of work to do. Don't get me wrong. Okay, I think there's still a lot of people who have not really consciously made the effort to address that small voice in the back of their head that's telling them something is wrong. I think we're still going through that early stages where there's a lot of people who are just happy with the lie, happy with the illusion. Okay, the Matrix, the steak tastes great in the Matrix. I'm going to keep eating the steak. That type of person, you know what I mean? They're not quite ready yet to unplug, and I get that. And I don't like using the Matrix analogy because it is a very Gnostic view, but I think it works for people.
And we're all plugged into it.
Yeah, and they get it. People get the analogy, and I think it's comfortable in the pink goo. It's nice to stay in your pod and not have to think about the horrors of the outside world and just believe that everything's perfect and okay and the world is fine and this is how it's always been and everything. The tomorrow will be the same as yesterday type of attitude, It's comforting. It's comforting, and the problem is it can't go on forever. And I think the veneer is fading quickly now. I think because they are basically taking everything away from people now. People are losing a standard of living that they were accustomed to. Even the older generations, like they're not getting their pensions anymore. Like things have changed. The people, I mean, I've been watching a lot of content, like anti-boomer content, and I watch it for research purposes. But you find this general division between the generations is that the millennials have no love loss at all or sympathy for the boomers who are now homeless. Because it's kind of like, just get a job.
Go
just
work
pull yourself
hard.
up by your bootstraps, go work harder. It's kind of, and then
you got to get out there.
Yeah, but the boomers are all like, why aren't you mad about this inflation or this type of stuff? Why, this is ridiculous. You can't do this to me. Why are they taking away all these things from me? And the millennials are like, this is the life we've been living our entire life. This is the way it is. Suck it up, buttercup. Welcome to the club. You know what I mean? Like, we don't care anymore. Like, it's hard to have sympathy for people who've been walking around in mansions for the past 50 years, completely oblivious, voting in the same policies that have been destroying us and allowing this to happen while stealing the future and pulling the rug out for future generations and hoarding everything. It really is hard to have that sympathy for the younger generations. Now, look, I'm not here to play into that game because I think even
Right.
that's another division we have to be wary of. That's kind of been played against us. Turn generations against each
100%.
other, turn the young against the old, turn families against each other, turn the sexes against each other. It's every division that exists where there should be harmony has been turned into chaos. Every
Yes.
duality, and that's just another one. But again, I do think even the older generations, because they are now losing that thing of realizing, oh, wait a minute, we were played too. We really have been kept in a fat and comfortable jail cell, for so long with entertainment that we haven't realized, like, we've kind of let it slip by, and we've caused a big problem by our inactivity.
Yeah.
I think that's happening now. But again, it's going to take a long time. But another thing as well, and this is not pleasant to think about, but older generations who are still invested in the lie are going to die soon. That's actually just a fact. Like, they might have extended care and living because of advancements and so forth, but those generations are going to drop away, and all you're going to have left eventually are the Gen X's, the millennials, and the Gen Z's and Gen Alphas and Gen Betas. No silent generation or boomers around anymore, who have only lived in the shit. That's us, who have only lived in this control system. And we're going to know. You can even see it now, like, younger generations know. They know 100% who's really pulling the strings and what's really going on. Now, there is a level of apathy among the younger generations, but they're too young yet to have any investment in the system at all. So
Yeah,
why should
I
they
think
care
it's more
anyway?
that. I think it's more
You
that
know,
trying to have fun, trying to eke out any bit of fun that they can have in this world.
yeah,
I'm gonna hurry up and travel while I can. I'm scared to death I'll never be able to, We didn't grow up afraid of that, right? Um,
exactly.
so since you had this, I think it's hilarious that you just thought of it like 30 seconds when you were making the thumbnail, because it really is a wonderful name for what has to happen, and maybe what already is happening that you just happen to observe and put a name on it. But the thing that you said that I like the most so far is that you believe that it will work exponentially to our advantage, as well as they think, or better than the way they're thinking it'll work for them. And I agree with you. I could poke holes in AI all day long, super easy. People will say something and I'll have one comment back and they'll be like, "Oh, I didn't think of that," But I do want to hear what, since that moment, you make the thumbnail, it's running around in your head, and I just know how your head works from watching you so much. What are some of the other things that you flesh out? Have you even thought of how how to attract people to the concept? Because if they can get to the concept, then they're more likely to be able to go, "Oh, maybe I should try this other realm, the kingdom of heaven, and maybe I should listen to the Holy Spirit, and maybe there is an actual way that I know." Even little things like, should I go on Carmen's podcast today, or should I spend time with my family? Like, what is God wanting me to do? I mean, I look at it that way. If anyone ever cancels on me, I'm like, bless you. I hope it goes great. I really don't care, because I want God's timing more than I want anything.
Mhm. I mean, my channel is dedicated to trying to communicate the truth to people. That's what it's about. It's called
Right.
Understanding Conspiracy for that reason. And I've tried many methods over the years to try my best to kind of bridge that gap, because there's a huge gap between people who don't know and people who do know. And I think a lot of people approach that method quite explosive in a way that kind of like destroys every bridge you've ever made with people around you,
A
burns them
great
all
point.
down, and nobody wants to talk to you ever again because you're that crazy person in the room that makes things awkward now when you walk in. You don't want to end up being that guy, because
No.
that guy doesn't get listened to, unfortunately. So there are ways to handle the truth and information and knowledge and things you've learned. I better communicate that to a wider audience. And I think my channel is kind of dedicated to trying to be that example, lead by example, but also I do have a Tips for Truthers series dedicated to these moments that we can all kind of relate to. And like tips I've kind of learned along the way. And the first tip is actually be careful who you tell. That's actually the first tip, because you can be rendered useless very quickly if you tell the wrong person the type of things you think about or are learning about. There's a time and place, for example. So your workplace, maybe you should be careful about who you're telling about this stuff at work. Because if you're rendered jobless, you're actually limiting your ability to function in the world and reach more people. So you have to have tact. And I think with this, it's not a case of shouting or screaming from the rooftops what the truth is, or
Yeah. Throwing
shaking
rocks at
people awake and
people.
slapping. Yeah, you do have to like be gentle and careful with them. Now, this isn't to talk about like the gospel. This is just about conspiracy stuff. I think the gospel, you could probably talk to anybody about that, and they've probably heard it already. And it's not nothing new. It's not a shock to them. You know what I mean? It's just another Christian trying to tell me the gospel. But I feel like if you can explain it to them in the right way, that finally gets through to them. You could be that guy that could do that for them. So I think everybody has a way of trying to explain what a relationship with God and Jesus is. And the way one person does it might not work for somebody, but the way another person does it might work for them. And I think people's lives are just a series of bumping into Christians, fumbling through what the gospel is until eventually it gets through because someone just said it the right way, you know, and finally in a way I understand. And you could be that person. I could be that person. You don't know in anyone's life. So I think you should always preach the gospel when possible and explain what it means to be a Christian as best you can. But when it comes to conspiracy topics, you have to have tact about how you're going to approach such things. You can't just come up to people and say, see those lines in the sky up there? They're poisoning us and killing us. It's in our food. It's in our water. And we don't really know what it is, but it's got barium, strontium, aluminum in it. And it could have mixed in with some kind of thing called Morgellons that bursts out of the skin. And then it seems to merge together in some sort of biomechanical way. And we're all like wired up with this now. And everybody's got it. And it's now hooked up to the systems and the pylons that have gone up everywhere with the 5G. You understand how that can go, right? And that's what it's like when you're a truther. You go on and you link one thing to the next thing because it's all connected, and before you know it, you've literally spoken for 2 hours straight to this person. They haven't said a single word and they're just looking at you like, that was intense. Stay away from me. Don't come near my children.
Well, and
you know
think
what I mean?
the cognitive dissonance does hurt, and that's why people press against it, or they don't want to talk about it, or they walk out of the room, or they put their head in the sand. It's because it hurts them, because they're not mature enough to handle the fear that is coming at them, which I think is one of the ways that you can help people, is that you can stand in this and know all this stuff and still be happy and still have a family life. And so to me, it's more about getting people to mature. And so what is it about that singularity that allows for the maturing? Like, what is the difference in that gap? Do you know what I'm asking?
Well, I think when the singularity for the truth is here, it's going to be like your dad pushing you into the pool when you were 4 years old. You better sink or swim. It's going to come to a point where the truth will be known. It'll be revealed to you. You're going to know. They're going to externalize this. The hierarchy will externalize itself.
Right.
And literally the devil will say, yeah, I rule this place. Okay, and everyone's going to know, figuratively. You know, I don't know how that's going to look really. I don't know if
Right. At least that's the rumor.
Devils, you know? Yeah, but it's kind of that. It's going to be on the table. Everyone's going to realize, yeah, we rule the world. We've been doing it for hundreds of years. And yes, we worship Lucifer. Join us. We can give you wealth, wonderful thing. Lucifer's not really a bad guy. He was the knowledge bringer. He freed you from the Garden of Eden, from a cruel, evil prison keeper of a God who wanted to keep you down. That type of stuff will stop being revealed, you know. And most people who are living through abject poverty and misery and pain and death and suffering, because the New World Order will just be like that, you know, we'll be like, yeah, all right. Anything's got to be better than this, you know. And I think that's what they're aiming for. So I feel like when the singularity hits, it's going to be like you're gonna know whether or not. Now it's how people internalize the information, the knowledge. Are they going to become apathetic, or are they going to become proactive? And I feel like the truth of Christ is the thing they need with it in order to be able to proactively utilize it. Because if they're still clinging on to the fear of death as the inevitable end of all being, then they haven't really understood the full truth yet, that death is not the end.
Right.
Not even close. Okay. The whole world is geared around fear of physical death. That's the fear they use to control people. Your body will die. You could suffer. You could get tortured. Anything could happen to you. You could end it all. You got so much left to do and experience. You know what I mean? You're not finished yet. You didn't drive those sports cars, or live in that mansion, or have all that sex, or eat all that food, or finish that TV series. There's always something in the world that's going to appeal to the flesh. And it's kind of, I think, what Christianity offers, what Christ offers, the truth of it is that understanding that death has no sting anymore. It's not the end. No, it's just a transition period to the next thing. And I think if that mentality, that understanding can truly come back to people, but a Christ-centric version, then I think that can be the thing, the coal, the fire underneath people when the truth comes out and gets externalized. when the singularity hits, that can make us really have that moment of something akin to manifesting the kingdom of heaven on earth through the body of Christ. Now God brings the kingdom of heaven down, not people. Okay. And but we can at least try our best to do what we can in the meantime, is what I'm trying to say
Well,
here.
I
I'm
don't
not trying
know.
to take
I have a
responsibility,
question about that. Do you, because I believe one of the greatest things that ever happened to me was truly understanding the fruit of the Spirit, the 9
Mm.
aspects of the one fruit, and how it is one fruit for a reason. It's not like, hey, guess what? This person has self control and this person is it, but that they're cultivated. And in cultivating those, you do kind of participate with God in realizing that it's already here. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, this is God's creation. This is
Right.
his world. The devil may have hijacked it and claimed ownership, but he doesn't actually own anything, and he's just a poser. And this is God's world and his creation. And I think that it's perspective that makes you realize that it is all here now, and we can have it if we want it, type of thing. So I think there's a great phrase that gets used in our community. It's either know your authority or no authority. That's the kingdom. That's the kingdom mindset.
That's
That's what
so
it
good.
means to. That's what it means to be in
That's
the kingdom
so
of
good.
God.
I love that.
You are a subject of the King of heaven, of Jesus Christ. You are a citizen in his kingdom, not of the earthly kingdoms. Although you may have a paper self and a straw man made in your name and image that represents you in the world, you are fundamentally a child of God. You are subject to the King, to Jesus Christ, and you are in his kingdom. If you realize that, and then the law of man bears no weight on your decision making or responsibilities. You only do what is right in the eyes of the kingdom of heaven, of the king,
Yeah.
what the king tells you to do, and that's Jesus. And I think if more people had that mindset, there'd be a lot less fear, and there'd be a lot more action.
And
Because it's
that's
kind
what
of no,
I'm after. That's what I'm
yeah,
after. I'm after helping people see that it is only a maturing, and that maturing doesn't hurt. Like if you look back on your journey, and 2014 is when you started, and here you are now, and you had that break, but you didn't know that you would be one of the most brave men in the world. Like you were one of the few people that were able to see it, but also stand in that power. And you faced all of those, public things that people go after you when you, and it's not that bad. The things that I think we're afraid of are never as bad as we think. I mean, when you look back, did you ever think that's the journey that you would be on?
well, I've always had a quite thick skin, to be honest. I know not everyone kind of does,
Yeah.
and I don't believe what caricatures people make of me. So
Yeah.
I know who I am, and I know
Sure.
God knows who I am, and I only care about his opinion at the end of the day. And he sees me even when no one else does, and I need to make sure I'm still true then as when I'm in public. You know what I mean? So I try and be as consistent as possible. Um, and yeah, I think there's nothing to fear but God himself. I think a healthy fear of God is necessary. He's the one who made you and can truly unmake you. Man may be able to kill the body, but who can kill the soul? And I think that healthy understanding and that respect for authority is another thing that needs to be cultivated in a lot of Christians. And I'm not saying Christians don't have that, don't get me wrong, but I think a lot of people don't understand what a kingdom means and what it is to have a king. It means that you humble yourself before them and get down on your knees and you understand that you are not better than the creator in any way, and you do not know better, and you follow instructions and you follow orders whether you like it
Yeah.
or not, because
Yes.
that is what's best for you. And a lot of people don't want to do that in modernity, we'll call it. Modernity is about liberty, freedom of choice.
The
It's
worldly
about no
realm,
kings. Yeah, it's
pleasure.
about no kings. Exactly. It's about you are your own God, you are your own king, no authority higher than self. And that's going to take a long time to kind of break that down. But I think the kingdom theology is the best thing that kind of gives that back to people. But again, I'm not looking to start like a new church or religion. This is just basic gospel stuff. This is just what it means to follow Jesus Christ. He is a conquering king on our behalf. And I'm not saying go out there and be a militant yourself and go and start conquering nations, because it doesn't happen through violence in our realm, from our level. All we're called to do is make disciples of men, and that's done through words, that's done through teaching, that's done through example. And I think that's our best weapon. And I think the world would love it if we got violent. That's what I was
Oh, that's
arguing
what they
earlier.
want
Yeah.
more than anything. I really do believe that. I mean, look at what happened, during COVID. There, all the bricks being delivered for a reason. It was. Have you ever tried to get people to really get behind a movement? I know tons of people in Dallas. I have far-reaching connections. I used to get people going for but to get an entire group of people to go fight in the streets, that those people are being paid, in my opinion, every time. I don't care. I've seen grassroots stuff. I've seen it never pulls off. Like, no one shows up because people have other things they'd rather do. And to me, that really says a lot. But
Mm,
I do think what you said is so important, because to me, if you reverse engineer anything, you can fix the problem, but it helps when you have somebody that's already fixed the problem. And when you said, I have thick skin and I already knew who I was. And I think there's so much codependency in this world, and there's so many people that are trying to please others. They've never taken that time to productively isolate and become who they really are, and to connect with God at that quiet, peaceful level, that they
mm,
really don't cultivate the actual aspects that it takes. And I think that's what
yeah.
you've done, is everything from, like, I've been watching a ton of your videos, everything from, doing different types of psychedelics to, trying all kinds of things, and then finally going, oh, well, maybe it is God. Um, Sometimes it does take that. And like you said earlier, seeking on the wrong doors, knocking on the wrong doors, and then finally getting to it. But then also you said, God knows you. And I think that you have to come to a place of knowing that God knows you. And there's a lot of people that I think that are Christians, that I think are being hampered sometimes by the churches. I'm a big wilderness church person. I think there's no better church than the wilderness. And so, I just love that you actually, without meaning to, just kind of gave the formula for the truth or singularity kind of armor. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I remember my isolation period. I had one, where I really was alone for like 3 years. Like, really was, like, very little contact with the outside world, very much just in my own conspiracy research, focusing, reading the word, and learning and trying to take it all in and get to grips with everything. But in that time, yeah, I was alone for a long time, and I know no relationships, nothing. I was done with it all, and celibate and lonely and just in the dark, my dark shed, just trying to learn everything and get to grips with reality. And it was those years where I was basically talking to God, for the first time,
Yeah.
and getting to understand how to build that relationship with him, and to hear the still quiet voice, and a lot of time in silence, just thinking, just letting my thoughts run. And that's when you hear him. That's when he tells you things, and that's when you kind of understand things, and that's when epiphanies happen, and that's when the Holy Spirit starts to work, I find. And I think everybody needs that moment to be alone with themselves, to understand who you are. Who am I? Really, without the noise, without what the world tells me I am. Because that's what you this is I like talking about this because it's very meta about reality, but a lot of people aren't really being themselves. They're being what the world has feedbacked to them about who they are.
And programmed too.
So
It's
yeah.
partially not their fault, until you
No,
take the
no,
time
no.
to understand that you've been programmed, you can't know you're programmed.
Well, everyone's running some kind of programming. This is the problem. And what they do is they meet you and they feed back to you who you are based on how they treat you, talk to you, and react to you and who you
But you're
are. And they can't.
special, Paul.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, they
Their
can't
big
help
trick.
but like kind of spew their own programming onto you in some way, and they judge you based on how well you kind of gel with their programming, And it's kind of
Yeah,
that's how fandoms get made. Like, we are both programmed the same, and we like this. We run the same operating system, so let's be friends. That's kind of how it operates in, again, in an analogous way. And I think a lot of people believe they are who they are because that's kind of who, like, the world has told them they are. So I'm the guy who smokes weed every day. I'm the stoner of the group or something. And everybody expects that from me. And I have to perform that role from now on because that's who I am, you know. That's one example. Everyone's got their own character, their own persona that they put on every day, the mask they wear every day and step into because the world expects them to continue being that role. I find when you become a Christian, you lose it all. You're born again. The robe, the mask comes off. You're naked before God, who you truly are, you know, and you have to come to terms with who you really are. And
Yep,
and it's
yep.
hard. It's painful actually. It's a
It's
horrible
painful, but
process.
then the other side of it, after you go through what
Yeah.
I call no man's land,
Yeah, that's a
and
good
you've
one.
got
That's a good one.
bombs coming at you, you know, you're in like you just came out of the trenches, which is the worst time of your life, and then you gotta go through no man's land. Uh, but on the other side of that, you have the victory, you won the city. And I would go so far as to say, like, you literally gave the formula. You know who you are. You know that God knows who you are because God watched you walk through no man's land. But then the third one we hadn't talked about yet is you transformed from fear to trust, not only in yourself, but in those moments of quiet, like you were talking about, like you met God. And one of the things that I know for a fact that they do, I learned from one of my military friends, is they're always trying to push you off center, off center, off center, off center. And then they'll throw you something that you can hold on to because they know you won't let go of it. And that is a false idol. That is the thing we shouldn't be grabbing onto. And so I love that when I'm so glad I asked you that because it basically outlined where people need to be. And then it makes so much sense because now you're providing the hope that someone can get thick skin, know who they are, know who God is, make it through no man's land, and then trust God.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the another way of kind of phrasing it is a lot of people have their identity rooted in an idol, as you've mentioned, something of the world, something physical. So they center their entire personality and life around that thing that's in the world, and that can be a TV series or a music genre or a clothing style or there's many cultures out there you can become a part of, and people identify with it and they become a part of that and that becomes their entire identity. And I think, like I said, that the self-actualization process after going through no man's land is having all of that destroyed to the point where your identity is not rooted in something of this world. Who you are now is a member of the kingdom of God, and your eyes, your passion, your personality is centered around something not of this world. And because it's intangible as we can understand it from our perspective, you're free. Like, you actually freed yourself from the world in that respect. Nothing of this world anymore will get you. Nothing of
Yeah.
this world will catch your adoration to the point where you waste your time
Yes.
anymore. And that's what counts while you're here. Your time. What are you going to do with it? Because God didn't give you this time for nothing, and until you self-actualize and let go of the idols, which are things of this world, and have your personality now centered around the kingdom of heaven instead, which again is so intangible that it actually frees you to all possibilities of who you actually are, is a child of God made in his image. And that's power. You've been given power now. You've been given authority. And with that, it's a humbling experience. And in order to effectively use that authority, um, you need to go through the self-actualizing process first. Because if you don't, then you'll end up doing something evil, like starting a war or doing genocide, which is tends to be what people that still cling to the world do. And those people who go down that route, well, they're the ones who have gained a nationalist identity. Those are the ones who it's like, my country is my idol, my flag is my idol, there's still an earthly element to it. My border is my idol, my team is my idol, my side, my colors. But again, true Christians dropped all of that. Like, that's the point. That was the point of being born again. I think that's what it means, and no idol before God is very serious. It's a serious
Yeah.
commandment, no other
Yeah.
gods before me. And that's the point. That's how you do that. But it doesn't come with simply saying, okay, I'm just going to pray every day to God. No, it's more of transformation that proves that you're in that state, not just an action necessarily.
Yes.
And again, that can only be done through inaction. It turns out sitting there quietly for 3 years, just thinking through who you actually are and realizing, I suppose it's realizing who you are not. That's what you're
Yeah,
going through
that's
a
true
process of,
too.
you know.
Because that's like a friend of mine always says that you can tell somebody's identity by their sin, because sin kind of defines identity, because otherwise we just come out as a baby and we're perfect, right? It's not
Mhm.
until we do the things that we shouldn't that we realize, kind of who we are, which is kind of an interesting way of looking at it. I had never heard it put that way, but I was thinking about what you're doing and how it spills over. So because of the way you responded just then, it gets me all lit up. I get excited because I'm like, he knows the map. Like he's been to the same island I've been to. He's been through the same territory that I've been through. And I know that this is the map, and that people have to have the map in order to really make that singularity, the truth or singularity, like exponentially expansive and like blowing things out, because you just wouldn't care. You just wouldn't care. You don't care, and not in a bad way, but in the most beautiful way possible. Does that make
I
sense?
think, yeah, well, I feel like more people are on that journey to getting to self-actualization, unplugging from the matrix, which is can only be achieved, like I said, by realizing who you are under God. So it's not like a new age concept where you kind of lose your ego or something, or ascend your consciousness to the next level, which is the most egotistical, self-centered, narcissistic concept you can have. The idea of becoming a citizen of the God's kingdom is basically realizing you're not better than him and you are a servant. It's different. It's humbling yourself.
But you're choosing
Um,
to be a servant. You're
yeah.
not choosing to stay back. Like right now, if I said, Paul, I could send you back and you would never have those 3 years, would you take that? No. Would
No, the
you?
suffering is what makes
Right.
you. The tribulations are the thing that makes you
Right.
who you are, and because then this is another thing I think about modernity. Like a lot of people don't have many tribulations. They don't have much suffering.
It's a great
Like I
point.
mean, we all kind of have like loved ones die and people get sick, sure, and it's rough. But relatively speaking, in modernity, we've lived a pretty bread and circus, cushy, entertained, serotonin peaking life, where everything, all pleasures have been given to us all times, and we want for very little. We can just go to the supermarket and get what we want when we want it. Generally speaking,
Yeah.
it's not for everybody. It's not, there's flaws with that, but you have like a majority of people where it is quite simple and easy, and because we have such a cushy life, to coin a British phrase, it's kind of a lot of people have not gone through a tribulation that's kind of molded them into someone with character, and they don't have character. They don't know who they are because they haven't had to face something which shows who they really are.
Yeah.
Because you don't know who you are until you face adversity, until you've been alone with your own thoughts, until you've been isolated from people, until you've lost everything, until you're in the middle of a war. And once you come out the other side, you learn a lot about who you are or who
Yes.
you are not as well. What would you really do in certain scenarios where you thought to yourself you would be one way, but when push came to shove, you were not. And I think even those failures are a good example of why you need Jesus and why you need God as well. It's like I am weak, I am selfish. I do make mistakes. And I don't always help people when it came to it. And I think all these realizations that I am not as great as I thought I was are necessary for you to humble yourself down, say, God, I'm a wretched sinner. I am sorry. I repent. Please take me in. Let me serve you. Show me the way. I cannot do it myself.
Yeah.
I've made too many mistakes, and I think that humbling, that breaking down, that moment is where you begin to become who you should be. And you lose the world, you lose those connections, and you start learning what it means to be a child of the kingdom. And then that's when the authority and real power comes. And it's kind of that's when you get given those keys to the kingdom. You get given that authority. It's kind of stand up, walk upright. You are forgiven. Take those burdens off your shoulder. Go and do
Mhm.
it right.
Yes.
That's what God gives you. And He gives you that belief, that passion, that fatherly pride that you need that gives you that confidence to go out in the world and say, I can do this. I've got
That's a
this, you know?
great way of putting it. That's a
Yeah.
great way
And
of putting it. Well, and so I have a question for you because I just realized it's been an hour. Thank you. I know it's like midnight your time. When you think about, okay, I went through it. It was really difficult. I spent those 3 years. I know the map. I know what I've got to do. Then you get to the place where you're spilling it out and you're starting to share it with others, because that is what we're called to do. We're called to share the good news, right? Once we
mm,
really understand it. Have you faced another one, and how much easier was it the next time? Because I've faced
and
two since my big one, the big awakening and the big, like, no man's land. And each time they process faster, and I'm more easily turned towards the light again. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, I can't believe Satan fooled me again, you know? And it's interesting because I was listening to your show before this one, and you were kind of going scorched earth on some stuff, and it's the
yeah.
exact thing that happened to me. And that was one of my other big lessons, was being able to peep out the subtle things. I mean, they are so subtle, and the differences between understanding online what is real and what is not. And so
Mhm.
I really appreciated that show too. But I was curious if you'd hit several other ones, but they're just easier after that.
Yeah, well, I think when I first started to talk about these things online, it was around the 2014 period when I started the channel, you know. I was a kind of a new Christian, you know, and I'd gone through I was still in the middle of the loneliness period, to be honest, you know. I would say 2017, 18. I mean, I went through it for a long time. I mean, even when I was working for Aldi for 5 years up until 2023, I was still alone. You know, I
Mhm.
wasn't like in the world, but I was certainly
Right.
working in the world. But I went back to my own research thoughts. And so I say I spent the good part of like 7 years basically in that state before I decided I realized who I was, what I want in life, and what I have in store, you know. And now I'm like married with 2 kids and everything's, and I'm self, you know, I have this channel and everything's kind of worked out
Yeah.
perfectly when I trusted
Yeah.
God and just put myself out there and quit that job that I hated, you know, that I wasn't who I was. That was the mask I had to wear to pretend to be something that fit into the world and made my parents happy, you know, but it's not who I am. It's not what I wanted to do, you know. I'm a conspiracy theorist and I'm a Christian. I'm not a supermarket manager. So I kind of had to, that was my first struggle, dropping everything and saying, no, I'm going to go do it on my own.
Yeah.
Don't need this job. I don't need to pretend anymore. I'm going to be who I am, and I'm going to trust God that it will work out. And it did. Here I am now. Wonderful, you know. But that was a
Woohoo.
leap. That was a huge leap. You know, I had a kid on the way. I was quitting a well-paying job and that I'd been in for 8 years. You know, and that is kind of just to see what happens. I didn't know I'd even start the channel, to be honest.
Yeah.
I went out to do
Same.
a photography. I went out to start a photography company, a wedding photography company, and it went on for 2 years before it failed. But by then, luckily, the channel had picked back up, and here I was, and I could now support myself with the channel alone, you know. And that's just, it's not luck. I put that down to my wife pushing me, thankfully, to make the leap and trusting that God had us,
That's
you
so
know. And I
cool.
couldn't have done it. I couldn't have done it without my wife or God, to be honest. It wouldn't have happened, you know.
But you can't have
And
trust in God unless you've been through that no man's land with
yeah,
just you and God, and He doesn't carry you.
well, I guess the point is kind of like I had to go through though that time where it's like
Yeah.
I know who I am and I know I'm living a lie
Yeah.
by continuing to just do this life, this
Right.
normie life where I'm in the system, you know. So that I had to have that conflict in me for a few years before I finally said, okay, enough's enough. Yeah, you're right. I shouldn't be doing this anymore. I'm gonna go do what I need to do, you know.
Stop
So
wrestling
yeah,
with God.
exactly. It was a big leap though. It's hard to let
It
go of.
is. It is.
It is. It's tough, but it comes with meditation, not the just talking to
I know
God
what you
type,
meant.
not the emptying your mind type, you know, but just contemplating, thinking, self-actualizing, processing your traumas, who you think you are, your identity that you made from the world, dropping it off, losing
All
your
the roles.
addictions, all that type of stuff, you know, and that takes time. It took me a long time. It wasn't overnight. But then when I came out of that hole and then gave it to God, and here I am now. I've gone through many tribulations since, you know, and it's been with navigating. You said
It's
liars,
easier, right? Doesn't it seem easier?
yeah, Well, because I dealt with a lot of snakes in the industry as working within corporate managerial positions as well. So I
Yeah,
kind of learned a lot about how people really are. So when I
right.
came to, I've been managing people, so I learned a lot about what different personality types, and also managers above me who are looking, see you as competition, and want to take you out because they believe they. And it's the same on YouTube as a content creator. There's people out there who are on a similar level to me who look at me and go, "No, you're a threat," and they go out there and they smear, they attack, they try and tell on me to audiences of things, and they lie, and they twist things or they frame things badly, and I've watched it happen. But me being me, I'm like a nice guy. I don't do anything like that to anybody ever. I
Yeah,
I just don't. But that's the problem, because I'm so nice. People see it as weakness and they try and take advantage, and
right.
until I'm not.
And
And that's the
until
problem.
they realize,
Okay.
"Oh, he has agency."
Yeah,
And he
exactly.
trusts
Yeah.
God, and he knows the map, and that's the part that is so cool about that truth or singularity, because I believe that is the only way out of war. I believe it's the only way out of, and of course, I know that you mean it differently. You don't mean it as the body of Christ, but as the people who are searching for truth, that is where it will lead.
Hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. It inevitably leads to Jesus,
Yeah.
and that's just why I'm saying, as long as people start realizing they're under control, which is happening now. Again, conspiracy is now mainstream, which is why I'm saying we're in the cusp of a singularity within the truth movement now. It's
Mhm.
not taboo to talk about anymore, and the label of being called a conspiracy theorist just doesn't stick. It's kind of like, yeah, I'm a conspiracy theorist, and you should be too. Like, because there's a conspiracy out there to understand. You need to
Yeah.
snap out of it. I think people are like, well, yeah, you should. Why aren't you a conspiracy theorist? It's the tables have turned, and that's a good sign. That means now, look, you can't. Not everybody is going to suddenly wake up, but a critical mass will, to the point where it instigates change, and that's what counts. And I think we're maybe about 30 to 34% of the population, like a third of the population right now, maybe is at that. But that if a third of the population tells one person each, that's two-thirds of the population, suddenly becoming aware of it. This is what I mean by being exponential. Now, becoming aware of it's one thing, and we're in that stage now. Internalizing it, doing the work, getting to
Yes.
the end, and
Yeah.
being useful with the information. That's the
Yeah.
process we're going to see unfold over the next like 5 to 4 years. That's the gestation period for a truther. It takes about
They're
five
gonna
to four
wrestle
years to
for a
come out of
while.
it. Yeah,
They're gonna
yeah,
wrestle for a lot
exactly.
like we did. Like, "Should I get a divorce? Should I get a divorce? Should I get a divorce?"
Yeah,
Not that I
before
think
you
it was.
calm down, it takes
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
the
No,
the,
it
the,
is
the
it is
Morgellon sphere needs to settle down first. They're getting to grips with everything, because there's a learning period as well. You got to
Oh,
spend years learning what's going on, and then dealing with what you've learned is going on, and then before you know it, you come full circle and you're yourself again. And now
yeah.
finally you can go out there and be useful with it. But then you've got to do the work on you, because it's one thing to learn about evil people doing evil things, and then on those bastards horrible, and yeah, down with them. But then it's kind of like, what about the evil in me? What have I done to contribute towards all of this? And you realize actually a lot. I've kind of actually been passively participating in the charade for so long that I have actually contributed towards making it worse. And then you have to go through that process, and that's when it always leads eventually to God. It
Yeah.
does. That's why I
No,
said maybe they
you
need
can't
the new age
one.
Gnostic pipeline. Maybe they need that first, because
Yeah.
that's just what they need, and I empathize with those people, and God bless them, and I hope they get there in the end. But I'm going to be right there saying it all just leads to Jesus in the end. I hope you realize that. Like, let me save you some time. You don't believe me now, but in
Yeah.
about 3-4 years time, you'll come back and thank me. That tends to be how it goes. And I'm at that point now, because I've been doing it for so long, where I'm getting the people coming back to me and thanking me quite a lot, because
Yeah, that's
that's
a
where we
good
are.
feeling, though. That's a great
Yeah.
feeling. It's like the few, there weren't very many, but the few people that are like, "Oh my god, you were all over the COVID stuff from the start." It was nice to have somebody acknowledge that. But I've gotten past that too. Like, I'm like you, I appreciate it very much if somebody takes the time to share that, and I genuinely embrace and receive it. But I don't have to have it like the old me would have liked to have at the time that it was
Mhm.
happening. Thank you for coming up with that phrase, and thank you for all you do. I really enjoy your work, and I enjoy your chat. I love that your wife is in there all the time. I love Wendy. I just made her a mod on mine. um, just wonderful stuff. You're a great role model. You give people hope. You know the map. And so I look forward to seeing what you do in 2026. I know it's going to be more of my focus. I had just recently done a video about this woman who is a former mermaid. She was like literally her cells and her her IVF was done in the 1940s, and it was Mengele, and I mean all this stuff, and it sounds crazy, I know, but it's just like the Jason Bourne guys, or there's a lot of people that have had layers of technology put onto them. There's a lot of transhumanists out there. There's a lot of people that I hope still have their souls, if that makes sense, that they're gonna be looking for this content because they're trying to get free, and that's a whole nother level of trying to get free. And so when we did the show, it was a 5-part series. I made sure the first couple we spent really kind of explaining why this could be real, because I knew people wouldn't believe it. And so I thank you for all the way you've stuck your neck out, and how it's benefited so many people.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the kind words. I do appreciate the support. And yeah, I think 2026 is going to be just more of the same for me. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, and I hope you keep doing what you're doing as well. It's been great to connect with you this year and get to know
Yeah,
you
thank
as well.
you. Thanks.
And I think we have a nice community going now in the truth community. I've got my small corner of it. You can come and join me on Telegram if you want to get more of a personal one-to-one talk. And I do my weekly podcast, the truth of therapy sessions, for that reason, to kind of help people cope with it. And today was my therapy. I'm not gonna lie. What you just listened to was me getting stuff off my chest. But it's usually call-in sessions for other people to come and talk about what's on their mind as well. And I understand, while you're going through that isolation period that we mentioned earlier, you need to talk. You need to get it out. You need to hear what it is you actually believe. If you
Yes.
keep it in, then all you've got is thoughts in your own head, and you never actually hear them. And
Yes.
hearing what something sounds like changes everything. Okay. And you might have that moment where you say out loud what you believe, and then say to yourself, wait a minute, is that what I really believe? Because you're actually hearing it for the first time. Okay. And I think a lot of truthers in the early wake up period fail to do that because they're so isolated and haven't opened their mouths in so long and actually said a word, because
Yeah, that's
they're
why
all
journaling
within.
is so good.
Yeah, exactly. Journaling is another great way of doing this. Get it out into the physical world.
Yeah.
So you can actually
See it.
truly understand what it is you believe, because I think you
Yeah.
realize you're actually holding on to a lot of beliefs that are crazy as well. That happens too.
Yeah.
And again, that's what my truth of therapy sessions ethos is really all about, getting it all out.
That's awesome. Well,
But
tell
yeah.
everybody about your book and your websites and anything else you want to share.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I wrote a book called The Nephilim Look Like Clowns. I think we've talked about that before on your channel, haven't we, briefly?
That was the first
Um,
time you came on, was that? Yeah. I
yeah.
started a
So that's
playlist for you, by the way, because this is your third.
Is it? Okay, I'm
Yeah.
losing track.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, so that's on Amazon. You can go find that. It looks like this. You can't miss it. The Nephilim Look Like Clowns. But there's also a series on my YouTube channel with all the videos there, which is what it's based on, where the research began in 2016. I have a lot of work on many other topics on my channel, including the Little Season. That's a popular one too. But I don't really make content on that anymore. I've just got my body of work, which was over a year and a half. You can go and look at all of that. And that's really all I can promote. I've got Patreon as well if you're interested in early access stuff. But yeah, get a book, Nephilim Look Like Clowns, if you want more of that. And just stick onto YouTube, Understanding Conspiracy. You can see it here. There's the logo in
There it
neon
is.
now.
I love it.
I
I
got it
really
all.
love that. It turned out great. You
It did.
should.
I'm surprised how well it turned out, to be honest.
Yeah. I noticed it as soon as I saw it. I was like, oh, that looks so good. So please tell your wife thank you again. And thanks to everybody that came and joined us. And everyone have a happy new year and a safe new year. God bless.
God bless.
Bye, Paul.
Bye now.
All right.